You may already have a domain name for your website, and perhaps you already have a company name with a matching domain name. But if you're early in the process of building a site and haven't yet chosen a domain name, you should spend a few minutes thinking carefully about your choice. In fact, even if you do already have your domain name, I'd recommend you listen to this lesson, because there are a variety of domain name problems you can encounter. I've seen a lot of mistakes with domain names, and in fact there's no simple answer to what kind of domain name you should have. There are both SEO and branding issues involved, so in this lesson I'm going to outline the different factors you should consider. We'll begin with the idea of putting keywords into domain names. Elsewhere in this course I explain how important it is to have keywords in URLs. And of course the domain name is the very first part of all the URLs in your website. So it seems obvious that domain names should have your primary keywords in them, and in fact in the early days of SEO it was very popular to register keyworded domain names like Rabbit Hutch Shop or even Rabbit-Hutch-Shop. These were known as exact match domains because the domain matched the keywords you were targeting. If you wanted to rank well when someone searched for Buy Rabbit Hutch, you would register the domain name buy-rabbit-hutch.com. And in fact, having keywords in domain names absolutely did help with SEO. The search engines, seeing the keywords in the domain name, would give some weight to those keywords, so the site would get a bit of a boost. This probably doesn't help much, if at all, these days. It's one of the things that has evolved, and the search engines have given keywords in domain names less and less weight. However, there is still one way that having keywords in your domain name can help, and that's for linking purposes. We'll be looking at linking in detail later in this course. Suffice it to say right now that you need links and you need keywords in your links in order to rank well in the search engines. And the more competitive your area, the more companies you're competing against in the search ranks, the more good links you're going to need. Well, as you'll learn, you can't always get nicely keyworded links, even though that's your goal. One problem is that people placing links often place them on the name of the website rather than using the keywords you want in your links. So if you sell rabbit hutches and your company name is acmeboxes.com, you'll get lots and lots of links with the keyword Acme Boxes in the link, which isn't very helpful. If you had a keyworded domain name, these domain name links would, of course, have to contain your keywords. So if the domain name was rabbithutchshop.com or rabbithutchstore.com, those domain name links will contain your keywords. How much does this help? It's hard to say, but I do believe it has an effect that it still helps with ranking. That doesn't mean you should always buy keyworded domains, though, because another issue is branding. Branding is a big subject in itself, but you need to understand that keyworded domains make really bad brand names. If you have the domain name rabbithutchstore.com, it simply isn't memorable. The very use of the keywords makes the name less memorable because it's now easy to confuse it with other keyworded domains. Is the name Rabbit Hutch Store, Rabbit Hutch Shop, Shop for Rabbit Hutch, Rabbit Hutches, Rabbit Hutch? Keyworded domain names are not memorable. In branding and in trademark law, there are different classes of company and product names: fanciful, arbitrary, suggestive, descriptive, and generic. Fanciful terms are just made-up words like Starbucks, Avo, Kodak, Udemy, and eBay. They don't say what the business is. In fact, they really don't say anything much. They have no meaning except as a company name. Then there's arbitrary terms. These are real words or names, but they don't relate in any way to the company's activities. Words such as McDonald's, Subway, Apple, Amazon, Progressive, and even Fudge, which sells hair care products. Suggestive terms are close to describing the activity of the business, but with a twist of some kind, like Burger Barn, Travelocity, and Home Depot. Descriptive names are names that very closely describe the business, such as First Bank or AuctionWeb. And finally, there's generic, names that exactly describe the business, businesses such as Rent.com or Realtor.com and Books.com. If you name your burger joint Burger, that's a generic name. Generic names are terrible. They're very hard to protect legally and rarely do well in the public mind. A general rule is that good brand names are fanciful, arbitrary, or perhaps suggestive. Descriptive and generic terms are terrible brand names. Take a look at the Forbes list of the world's top brands, for instance, and you'll see that there are no generic terms and few, if any, descriptive terms. So that's all I'll say about branding. You'll have to decide on this for yourself, depending on the kind of business you're building. But let me explain a few other domain-related issues. Firstly, which TLD should you use? Which top-level domain? .com is a TLD, .net is a top-level domain, .org, .co, and so on. These are what are known as top-level domains. So, which do you use? Well, the first thing to consider is whether the top-level domain you want to use is a generic domain, sometimes called a GTLD, or if it's a country code top-level domain, a CCTLD. If you use a country code TLD, you're telling the search engines that your business is related to that country. If you use a .uk domain, such as rabbithutch.co.uk, you're telling the search engines that your firm does business in the United Kingdom. Use .jp and you're saying that your business is in Japan. Use .us and you're in the United States. That's not always a problem, of course, but if you sell internationally, it can be. If you don't want your domain to say, we do business just in this country, then you need a GTLD, a generic TLD. Here's a very specific example given by Matt Cutts of Google. If you have a .jp domain, it might be hard for your site to rank in, say, Finland. The generic TLDs are domains such as .com, .net, .org. In fact, Google assumes that if a TLD is not a country code, it's generic, and also includes .asia and .eu as generic TLDs. In fact, Google even has a list of country domains that have become so widely used for commercial purposes that it regards them as generic TLDs, what it calls generic CC TLDs, generic country code TLDs. Domains such as .tv, .co, .me, .nu, and so on. You can find that list here. So, picking the right top-level domain is important. If you're in the UK, for instance, but sell worldwide, you might not want to use the .co.uk domain, but a .com domain instead. But there's another top-level domain issue, something I call domain confusion. This is based on people's normal bias for .com domains, especially in North America. People assume a domain name is .com, even if you tell them .net or .org, for instance. Years ago, I did a little consulting work for the Colorado Ballet, which had the domain name coloradoballet.org. I told them they needed to register the .com domain before someone else did. Within hours of registering it, we got emails from people saying there was something wrong with the ballet's website, because when they tried to load coloradoballet.com, they found themselves at a domain registrar. So clearly people were using the .com, even though Colorado Ballet had never owned or publicized it. Another example, while doing a link analysis for a client of mine, let's call them examplegadget.net, we found that 10% of the people trying to link to the site were accidentally typing .com instead of .net. What a shame to lose 10% of your hard-earned links. This is particularly a problem with the .net and .org domain names, probably less so with the new specialized domain names such as .trade and .shop. Now, the search engines don't really care which generic top-level domain you use. You won't get a boost because you use .com instead of .shop. They only care about the content of the site and the links to the site. But from a branding standpoint, the top-level domain choice is critical. There are plenty of .net brands that died while the .com brands survived, for instance. Finally, when registering domains, think about another form of domain confusion, the confusion caused by dashes, similar spellings, and plurals. Here's a classic example. I once had a friend who owned an ebook domain name, but I could never remember which one. Was it ebook.com, e-book.com, ebooks.com, e-books.com? I could never keep it straight. He actually sold the domain name eventually, and in fact, if you load these domains now, they go to 3 different websites. What a terrible brand name for all 3 companies. If I couldn't remember the domain name, And I worked with this guy. What hope is there for these companies' potential customers? Also, consider dashes. If you own, say, rabbithutchstore.com, you definitely should also own rabbit-hutch-store.com before one of your competitors does. So that's a quick summary of domain name issues. Worth thinking about if you don't have one yet, and in fact, even if you do, you might want to take a quick look at any possible problems. Is your top-level domain name going to hurt you when marketing internationally? Is your domain name likely to have domain confusion issues? Many of my clients have been able to register similar domains to avoid having somebody take a close domain name, and in some cases have even changed their domain names.